read this one out loud.
Okay. If rational choice theory, continue. If rational choice theory is correct, then people act only in ways that they expect will benefit themselves. But this means that rational choice theory cannot be correct because plenty of examples exist of people acting in ways that result in no personal benefit whatsoever.
Okay, so whenever I read a stimulus, one, I read slowly and I make sure I fully understand it. So here I'd be like, okay, if rational choice theory is correct, then people act only in ways that they expect will benefit themselves. So if rational choice is right, that means people will only act in a way that we know will benefit ourselves. But this definition or this means that rational choice theory cannot be correct. Like I'm already thinking like, okay, this is my conclusion. And our reasoning for that is because plenty of examples exist of people acting in ways that result in no personal benefit whatsoever. That one is actually kind of funny to have to try to teach you how to like reading sentence by sentence. But after I read a stimulus, I ask myself, is it an argument or a set of facts? And do you know what's the difference between an argument and a set of facts?
So I feel so, I'm trying to like, I know it, a set of facts is just, you can't debate it. It's just there. And an argument is you can pull stuff out and you're trying to.
Yeah, what does an argument have?
Not a flaw, like
A conclusion. An argument has a conclusion.
yeah.
So if it's an argument, which 90% of the stimuluses are arguments, I want to find my conclusion first. So what would be the conclusion of this argument?
But this means that rational choice theory cannot be correct.
Yes. So I find my conclusion and I just understand my reasoning. So I'm saying that rational choice theory cannot be correct because there's examples of people acting in ways that has no personal benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now I'm going to read my question stem. And so what kind of question is this?
A flaw.
Yep, flaw. So once I know that it's a flaw, I actually predicted answer. And so the very basic way of predicting answers to start off with when a flaw question is to ask yourself, what is my argument failing to consider, or what am I assuming here? So is this a rock? Well, one, it's a flaw question, so we know it's not a rock solid argument, but this means that rational choice theory cannot be correct. Why would you say this conclusion is not 100%?
I feel like it's too. This means rational. It's not really giving an example. I don't. I see. That's why if rational choice theory is correct, then people themselves. But this means rational choice theory cannot be correct because it's not really giving any reasons why.
Yeah, well, they're saying like plenty of examples exist of people acting in ways that result in no personal benefit whatsoever. Well, one, does it have to be personal benefit to benefit myself, right? Like if like they're assuming to me, like I'm like they're assuming that the only way that I can benefit myself is like a personal benefit, right? Like, can I benefit myself by helping my mom? Potentially, right? Like if I get reward out of that. Does that make sense? Like how I'm
Yeah.
So that's a loose prediction. It might not be it. But as we go through the flaw questions or these answer choices, we want to ask ourselves, did it happen? And if it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and start with A and read the A out loud.
Assumes as a premise the contention the argument purports to establish.
What does that mean?
I'm not even really sure.
So this is an answer choice for circular reasoning, but it's saying it assumes a premise as if it assumes its conclusion, right? So it uses a premise that assumes the conclusion to be true. So circular reasoning is hardly ever the correct answer on the test. Sometimes it'll be like it assumes what it seeks to establish or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so go ahead and go on to B.
Concludes that a theory is false merely on the grounds that the evidence for it is hypothetical. So just basically saying that whatever theory you're presenting is always going to be wrong because you can't really prove it. It's just like hypothetical thinking.
Yeah, so does that happen? Do we conclude that a theory is false just on grounds of the evidence for it is
No.
hypothetical?
Mm-mm.
No, so that doesn't happen. So I'm going to cross that off. All
Mhm.
right, so go ahead and go on to C.
Takes for granted that people who are acting in ways that are personally beneficial expected that their actions would be personally beneficial. Um,
So do we take for granted? So this means that we assume or do we that people who are acting in ways that are personally beneficial expected that their actions would personally benefit them?
I ended up picking that answer.
Okay. So let's go
For
ahead and okay, let's skip this one for now and go on.
okay, that's what I
Let's
was
go
like.
ahead and read D.
Presumes that justification that examples of people acting in ways that are not personally beneficial greatly outnumber examples of people acting in ways that are personally beneficial.
Okay, so
Um,
what does presumes without providing justification mean?
Assumes.
Yes, so we can literally cross that off and say assumes. So do we assume that examples of people acting in ways that are not personally beneficial greatly outnumber the examples of people acting in ways that are personally beneficial?
No.
No, like I don't even know what that means. I'm like, who cares that they're acting in ways that are personally beneficial? I'm like, that's silly. All right, what about go ahead and read E.
It fails to consider that people acting in ways that result in no personal benefit may nonetheless have expected that acting in those ways would produce personal benefit.
Okay, so fails to consider. So does our argument fail to consider that people acting in ways that result in no personal benefit may have these people may have expected that acting in that way would actually produce the benefit?
I feel like, yeah, just based on the beginning, fails to consider.
Yeah. Well, it fails to consider like, and so technically, like, does this happen? Do we fail to consider this? Yes, technically we do. And then we have to ask ourselves, like, well, is that a problem? So is it a problem that we fail to consider that? Because our theory is saying, like, hey, if this is true, this
Mhm.
means that people only act in a way that will benefit themselves. But then we're like, but there's plenty of examples that people do something and it didn't benefit them.
Yeah.
So are we failing to consider that, hey, maybe these people that did these things did it thinking that it would benefit them and then it just didn't?
Yeah.
Could that potentially be a problem?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
it, yeah.
So that's why the answer is E. But let's go ahead and go up to C. So it says, takes for granted that people who are acting in ways that are personally beneficial. Okay, so they're acting in a way that they do get personally benefited, expected that their actions would be personally beneficial. Well, yeah, like that's the whole point here, right? Is that people expect that they're going to act in a way that they're going to receive. But our issue is our support is saying that people didn't get benefits.
Mhm. Okay, I see what
So
it is. Okay.
so it's like, yes, like I guess we do take for granted that people are doing this because of this, but it's not a problem because that's not what our reasoning is talking
Mhm.
about at all.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a lot of the I have issues too is just like trying to figure out the language and how it's written. Sometimes it goes over my head a